welcome back to my channel. So I'm going to carry on going through your comments for the Empire of Normality videos. When I've done that, I will then sort of backtrack a bit and have a look at your comments on the comments videos. So we got up to part, is it 17, I think? I think it was 17. Yes, so one of you says on video part 17 of the Empire of Normality videos that I did, I am highly verbal as well. People overestimate how well I can function. I can't work either. I am in a relationship. I have a part-time carer because I have a hard time looking after myself. I have trouble with activities of daily living, ADLs as they are called. People can't understand that you could be fairly intellectual, but you can't look after yourself, but they are different brain functions. Another one of you says, I don't think neurodiversity as presented by the NDM, that's the neurodiversity movement, is at all scientific. So while Singer was inconsistent, I think she was at least honest in stating that the concept was political, not scientific. It is hard to make the case that autism is simply a neutral difference and that the disability it causes is primarily due to society. In anyone other than the most minimally impaired. Which is why Singer and the NDM foregrounds the experiences of the least affected. So now we're on to the comments for video part 18 of the Empire of Normality. So another one of you says, people trying to remove the disability from autism is frustrating. I argue with them online frequently. And another one of you says, in terms of neurodiversity contributing to society, I think it's important to distinguish between left-wing and right-wing framings on neurodiversity. Right-wingers do sometimes talk of how those who are neurodivergent can be useful in a business context, but this goes alongside their complaints about many autistic people being an economic drain, exaggerating or even inventing autism to avoid employment. Right-wingers do see a person's worth primarily in economic terms. By contrast, those who are left liberal are just trying to show that autistic people and those who are disabled, more generally, can make big contributions and challenging stereotypes of incapability, even where disabled people cannot contribute. So another one of you says, and so by bringing Nick Walker into the discussion, Chapman reveals the queer theory origins of much of the neurodiversity movement's thinking. Of all the critical theories that owe their origins to classic postmodernism, queer theory is the most anti-empirical, which is why I dislike it so much. Walker promotes the idea that because psychiatry, under the influence of a homophobic society, once labelled homosexuality as a disorder, so therefore everything that psychiatry labels a disorder today is also ultimately just a normal variation that is being pathologised under the service of the oppressive discourse of normality. I think this is such reductionistic, irrational, simplistic and unscientific overgeneralisation that it leads to the denial of reality. That's some in the NDM engaging. As an aside, I do wish queer theory scholars would stop misusing Thomas Kuhn, whose philosophy of science is very important and whose argument they frequently distort. Like you, I'm gay, and like you, I have never in my life experienced it the way I experience either autism or OCD. There is nothing objectively or subjectively impairing about my sexuality. When Walker compares neurodivergence to ethnicity, it becomes even more absurd. Yet back when I was growing up, the homophobia all around me made my life difficult, but that difficulty vanished the moment I was either on my own or in gay-friendly spaces. The difficulties I experience as a result of being autistic don't completely vanish when I'm on my own or when I'm in an autism-friendly space, because they are intrinsic to me. I totally agree with you that we can challenge ableism, stigma, and oppression without denying autism is a disorder, without denying reality. Thank you very much, that's good points. I 100% agree with that. And another one of you says, great point on individualism, so true. So I'm going to stop there because there's still a number of other videos I need to go through in your comments. It's good points raised there. One thing I have watched recently that I highly recommend, by the way, it's on YouTube, is Russ, what's his name? What's that scholar called, that famous ADHD? Russell Barkley, that's the one. Russell Barkley, he's a psychiatrist, I think, an American psychiatrist, and he's an expert on ADHD. And he's done a good video which is available on YouTube where he actually critiques the neurodiversity movement, or at least the extreme permutations of the neurodiversity movement when it comes to ADHD. And I thought he really summarised the argument very, very well. He shows how, yes, ADHD, and I would say also autism as well, I think the argument applies to autism too, but he was talking specifically about ADHD. He said, yes, ADHD, the traits of ADHD exist along a natural continuum, like a dimension, like a bell curve. So, at one extreme of that bell curve, you will have people who are gifted, he called it gifted, in, say, executive functions, which is the core difficulty in ADHD. People who are gifted in executive functions, self-regulation. But most people are somewhere in the middle of that continuum, of that broad distribution. And then as you get further along the continuum to the other side, people will start being a bit deficient in executive functions, but not to the extent of impairment. So they're still able to get by in life. They're just not particularly good at them, but they're still able to get by. So they're not what he would say are disordered. And then at the other extreme of the bell curve, your parallel extreme to those who are gifted in executive functions, you end up with ADHD. And he says that, so although it's a dimension, it makes meaningful sense to carve up a category in that dimension where you get to the point where the traits actually begin to cause the person harm. And that's the core definition of disorder, which is where you have a dysfunction in a particular trait, a dysfunction in a particular trait that is universal to the human species, that is an evolved trait in the human species that humans are expected to have in order to sort of facilitate survival and, enabling people to reach their goals. It's an adaptive trait. When a person experience significant difficulty in a species, in a universally evolved species-specific trait. In ADHD, that's the 7 executive functions. When a person experiences significant difficulty, so it's more than what you see in a normal distribution, it makes sense to call that a disorder, because at that point you're going to see an increase in either, and it could be all three, in either and, sorry, we're not making sense here, what am I trying to say? Go back on myself. I should do a video on this, a different video on this. Yeah, he says it makes sense when you get to the point where it causes significant impairment, that's when you call it a disorder, and a disorder is where you begin to see either an increase in mortality, morbidity, that's to say injury, harm, or other illnesses, and impairment. And impairment is described as an inefficiency in functioning. So any one of those 3 areas could be significantly impacted, or all 3 of them could be significantly impacted in someone who has a disorder. and he says that you need to carve up the dimension, you need to create a category in the dimension in order to make a decision, because once someone's trait has become so impairing that they're struggling to function, a decision has to be made on how to help them. That's where you need to open up the door, if you like, to services and maybe treatment. It's no point asking for treatment and then turning around and saying, oh, by the way, this is just a neutral difference, this is a gift. It doesn't work like that, he said. You know, you only get treatment, you only get assistance if something is causing you significant problems, if it is a disorder. That's how it works in the real world. And he says ADHD, he says, is categorically a disorder because it meets the definition of disorder. And he says that people who argue that it isn't a disorder don't have a criteria to rest on. He always wants to ask them, you know, what criteria are you using? What criteria are you applying to the reams of literature that shows very clearly how ADHD is a disorder? What criteria are you applying to say it isn't a disorder? And he says that ultimately they don't have a leg to stand on. They don't, it's just all ideology. And he says it's really very, very harmful. So I thought it was a very good video on critiquing the neurodiversity movement, the extremes of the neurodiversity movement, I hasten to add, because he's not against all of the arguments made in the neurodiversity movement. It's the extreme, you know, this sort of reductio ad absurdum part of the neurodiversity movement that really does go very, very extreme. And like one of you said, ultimately it's completely anti-reality and it's just ideology. It doesn't have any bearing on reality. Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to say that. But anyway, I'll be coming back to this soon, so thank you for watching.